discuss the 2021 appropriations budget. I'm here, Mr. Rob, Mr. Gates, Mr. Roberts, and is Mr. Martin on? I see.
I'm here.
Okay. All right, so all of us are here. Let's start with the pledge of allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we'll do this like we did last time. Just open discussion. Unless we need to break in and not get moving more smoothly. Who would like to go first? Is the chief?
If I could have one quick second here to kind of go over a couple things. And Nathan, Lance, for some reason my email is not cooperating with me. But the document you sent on Friday, or I sent on Friday, is the exact with 2 line items different. They're in the health department. We just reduced some grants and some miscellaneous expense related to the West Main sewer. But we'll talk about that when we get to that point. All of you, other than probably Nathan, you probably don't have this lead sheet. But the first page on this lists, the first 2 line items are the ones that I reduced from last week. The rest of that section is all utilities line items that we switched around after our utility meeting. So we can either discuss those first and get them out of the way, or when we get down through it, we can talk about them individually, whatever you guys would prefer. But we will need your approval to change those from what we had at the last meeting. Does that make sense?
Oh, no.
Yep.
Sorry, Charlie. My apologies. Yeah. Would you guys like to discuss those real quick, or do you want to get the chiefs out of the way so that they don't have to sit in on this?
But this just puts on paper what we had discussed at the last meeting.
Correct, yes.
And I think we had agreed to that at the last meeting.
Okay. That's okay. Then I won't really go into it then. It sounds like everybody's happy with that. I'm done, yes.
Okay. Keep going. We'll go back.
That would be on page. We'll start with where's police is on page
You're
7.
going to start on page 7, I believe.
Yes.
I wanted to clarify, we're using the same document then that you sent out, correct, Mr. Crum?
Correct. Yes.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and start then, I take it?
Yes, please.
Okay, can everybody hear me okay? Any issues?
No.
Okay, so apologies first. I had some major computer trouble. I did not send out my proposal, my normal long reading proposal until today. Had some issues converting to PDF. And then with the computer change, I had some additional issues that caused me to lose the entire document and recreate it last Tuesday until about midnight. So those numbers went, final numbers went to Mr. Crum, I think Tuesday night. He's had a chance to review them and plug in numbers. And so they are the same or similar numbers. So in using this page 7, wages, we had a contractual increase of, I believe, Mayor, 2%, correct? And there's also the consideration you're gonna have to take into account. There's a wage reopener that is eligible in August. So when I looked at the wages, all the wages, dispatcher wages, auxiliary police, all of the other considerations, including the health insurance, life insurance, all of those things are already calculated using a formula that already exists based on that uptick in wages. There are 4 people eligible to retire. That is myself, Captain Mack, Captain Rath, and Officer Majors. I'm not planning on leaving. I don't think Mack or Majors is leaving. I'm sorry, Mack or Rath is leaving. Majors has indicated originally he was retiring in May. He has since told me he's planning on retiring now in September at the start of the new school year. So calculating all of those sick leave, vacation, personals, overtime, comp time, the total wages and benefits possible that we would need to pay out if all four of us left at the same time is $117,000. That's included in that wage line item. I think moving down there, I think we had a slight increase in fuel. I think everybody anticipates a change in fuel costs. We're already seeing that go up currently. I expect that trend to continue. Not a whole lot changed. The only thing that I had we debated back and forth and that needs to be considered is the fact that prisoner housing. So we spent less in prisoner housing, but we also had let me see here, I think a 43% decrease in bookings in 2020 that was due to COVID. We also had many jails that shut down, would not accept prisoners. All of the contract jails that we work with did not house prisoners. The judge worked with Captain Rath, and she did institute a few house arrest programs where people were on electronic monitoring or set up to do electronic monitoring for to serve their time at home. But with most of our cases, if those people were a risk or we couldn't send them somewhere, we just simply changed their commitment date. So only on sentence misdemeanors, we changed commitment dates and rescheduled those people to come back. At some point in time, when we get through this pandemic and things return to normal, I expect that we're probably going to have more prisoners at one time. Although the goal that we've talked about here is to try as best we can to spread that out, to try to keep those costs down and spread out over maybe a 2-year period as opposed to a 1-year period. But remember that whenever we don't have prisoners, we're also not doing prisoner laundry. We're also not doing prisoner meals. There's a myriad of things that we're not doing, including medical costs that go way down when we don't have prisoners. So I expect that will increase. My fear was that we would be coming back in September or so and asking for an increase in that line item or be in an emergency position. I think we'll be okay. Captain Rath and I have talked, and I think we're going to try to spread that out, as I said, over a 2-year period, as opposed to trying to pack everybody into our jail in a 1-year period. Really, there aren't really many tremendous changes. Last year, I touched on it in my letter, we had a number of supply shifts. So while we didn't use some supplies because we didn't have as many people coming in and out, we did have an increase in sanitization and PPE supplies. Fortunately for us, most of those costs were covered with CARES Act funding, and that is just a one-time shot in the arm. So we don't expect that to continue. And I would expect that our supply numbers to be pretty much normal as other years. I don't really have anything else in that 101 that I have grave concerns about. I'll take any questions or concerns that anybody has if you want before we move on to anything else. I do want to mention, though, it's worth noting, we had a 43% drop in bookings. We also had a 38% drop in citations, a 20% drop in jail calls for service, and a 19.25% drop in total calls for service. So if we combine patrol and jail calls, those drop by it's 20%, 19.25% actually, we'll say. The other thing is offenses only went down, offense reports only went down by 12%, which I thought was kind of interesting. And we've seen a lot of, this question comes up sometimes, the effects of the I guess the COVID lockdown, if you want to call it that. there was concerns about domestic violence, overdose, and the suicide rate. And when I just compare from only last year, we increased by violence cases last year increased by 1 case, overdose increased by 1 case, and our suicides actually decreased by 3 cases. And I just say that just so that we understand that I think locally, those numbers weren't quite as significant as maybe they were nationally. So that's actually probably a good thing. We were a little surprised when we saw the numbers. I don't have anything really extravagant or any other questions or concerns in that line item as it's been appropriated, unless somebody has a question about that before we move on. The second fund that we have here that I show is on page 15. That is the Law Enforcement Trust Fund.
What fund number is that, please?
235.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I have different pages.
There's not really much to talk about with this fund. It's kind of similar in the past. This is really basically a reimbursement fund. So if we have that continuing professional training or we have any seizures, we are going through and we had an audit of our evidence room, and we've turned a little bit of cash in from the evidence room. We currently have a goal of really getting that evidence room as completely cleaned out as we can. So there were, I believe, I can't remember the number. I don't have it in front of me. Amber, do you remember how much we turned in just in that last? It was only a few $100s, but we do have a couple of thousand that are still sitting in the evidence room that we're trying to process through. Those funds would be going into that law enforcement trust fund because they're seized funds. Nothing exceptional or huge concerns from that. If there are no questions, the next fund should be the 238 fund. I show that on page 16. And I don't know what I did with page 16. Give me 1 second here and I'll double check this. Make sure I have it. That fund also, the 238, I can speak to it as I bring it back up here in that form. There's really no change. There is a section in there for supplies where we look for workbooks, things that we reimburse. We actually submitted for reimbursement. Officer Swisher noticed that we weren't submitting for reimbursement. Amber got him those numbers from last year, and we did submit for reimbursement. So we're able to get most of those funds reimbursed. We always get donations in a certain amount. Those expenditures aren't in any, they are of no grave concern. Unless there is a question on that. I think the next we had was, I have page 20, which is the capital improvements 300. And in that fund, we did not, I think we had a slight reduction in that. I really didn't, we tried to cut as much as we could from the top off of every fund that we had. So regardless of if it was 101, which we knew was a concern, we just kind of cut it. There is a request only for 1 police car and the equipment for the car. That's the only thing I've really requested in that this year. And I don't have, I will say this, I had a consideration of requesting taser replacements. So last year was the last year of payment for the tasers. that you graciously allowed us to purchase that gave one for every officer. Recently, the instructors came back and said we're having some battery issues. That's because they're 5 years old. They're only warranted for a certain period of time. I did not request a replacement. Part of that reason is I've been going back and forth with Axon over terms of another lease agreement and what they will give us for a lease turn in credit on the old tasers that obviously they're going to refurbish and reuse. The other thing is I would kind of like to wait and see how the finances pan out this year. If I think that we are in desperate need, and if I think that in communicating with Mr. Crum that the money is there, I think we'll make that presentation at council and make that request at council later in the year if we make the request at all. If we can get by this year without spending the money, I'm happy with doing that. I think that makes the most sense. So it's a reduced request there. When we look at the, go ahead, I'm sorry.
You spoke of refurbished tasers. Have we ever considered that, or are there reasons why we would not, or?
Yeah, I don't know what warranty they offer. I don't know what the reliability is. I don't think Axon sells them. I think there are a number of secondary market manufacturers that refurbish them and resell them. I would obviously prefer to have new tasers from Axon with a warranty that I know work. I know that what Axon would do, and that's the parent company of Taser now, what Axon will do is probably pull materials from those for the remanufacture of new tasers as opposed to refurbish and sell. I don't think they resell, but there is a secondary market for it. I've never really been horribly interested in that.
Very good. All right, thank you.
Yes, sir. The cruisers, I was going to comment on this. I really just want to thank council for allowing us to get new cruisers and equipment. Our maintenance costs have decreased drastically. Most every problem that we've had has been covered under warranty. And we are down now from previously having pretty high mileage down to the average patrol vehicle. The average mileage is about 40,000 miles. So we're extraordinarily happy with where we're at. We think we're on track. And as we move into a year where there's a little bit of financial uncertainty, it's imperative that we try to keep those maintenance numbers down and fuel numbers down. There is the 354 fund, and I will tell you that I wouldn't even bother looking it up because I did not include anything in that request this year. So there is no request. Whatever Mr. Crum has in that line item, I've requested nothing from the 354 fund. The goal last year, I think, was to try to phase out use of that fund. We should be well beyond it and trying not to incur any more expense out of that. We do have the 700 fund, which is on page 36. That is the police and fire pension fund. Really nothing worth noting. All of those numbers are based on formulas based on wages. Those are all pretty much provided by Mr. Crum in the finance department. It's a pretty large chunk of change, but it's normally anticipated. 702 police equipment fund is on page 37. And that is essentially only clothing allowance and standard equipment. No huge asks in there. We stripped everything down really as much as we can, unless we have to face additional cuts or council imposes those cuts or the administration imposes those cuts. I think this is a year that we just kind of take a time out, try to get by, maintain, see how the year goes, and then hopefully look forward to a brighter future next year as we continue to recover through the fiscal effects of the pandemic. I would only add that our Ward 1 council person should probably, when he checks his email, he should appreciate the cover photo of my proposal this year.
I have a copy of that right here. We'll just.
of interest from it.
Does anybody have any specific questions or concerns or anything that you think, I guess, that I should be looking out for next year from the committee? My main concern really, frankly, is the jail. That's the only thing that I ever really worry about in expense. It's a huge cost when you start looking at outside housing and all of those prisoner supplies. So I think we're going to do our best to try to manage that, work with the court, and try to keep those costs down.
Well, it's a credit to Judge Studer and her predecessor, Judge Schaefer, who have worked with the police department and, trying to keep costs down in the jail as much as possible. That's the fact that we're putting ankle monitors on people, that's good. I know that there's a cost for that. Generally, there is. And this is probably a conversation I should have with the judge. I would hope that the cost for that has some relationship to the defendant's wherewithal to pay. You shouldn't get home arrest, an ankle monitor, simply because you can afford it. That's unjust. That's quite a gallery there.
I did want to mention there's something that I do need to discuss with Mr. Ensman. I did call out. We noticed that we need to do some sealing in our front parking lot and the back parking lot. There had been sealing done previously, and I'm going to contact Mr. Ensman about a cost for the materials. Ron Shepard out at the service department said it is definitely something that they can do, and that will take care of that. In addition to that, there's a sunken area by the Sally Port, and we have gone ahead and called Coleman Asphalt, which is now I think Mid Ohio Blacktop or something like that. They did the original job, and Captain Rath contacted them. We weren't sure if it was because of a base problem or some type of settling, or from the service department trucks come and salt and plow our lots. We don't know if them turning around by that Sally Port door has caused a problem or not. But when we talked to Mid Ohio Blacktop, the owner said he remembered there was an issue that he had with the contractor that he spoke to them about with the base by that area. He was going to come and inspect it sometime this week. I don't know what that looks like. We'll obviously have to get a quote and cost and see what the actual problem is, and then see what the funds look like. And I'll talk to Mr. Crum about that at a later date. But that is one concern. I think Ron told me he thought a skid of the sealant would cover our lot no problem, but that's somewhere between $5,000 and $6,000. So I'm gonna have a conversation, offline with Mr. Ensman about how that works and if that's something that we can pay for. And I did forget to mention, we had applied for a grant through the Department of Justice it was a COVID grant. It got held up for a long period of time. We were looking at a shower system, kind of high volume decon showers in the Sally Port, along with a washer dryer in the Sally Port and a washer dryer in the jail. That came in to do that work came in at $21,000, of which we were awarded $4,400. I know that Captain Rath wrote the grant. He's worked with Mr. Crum on getting that taken care of and cleaning up that grant. But this is obviously, again, not the year, but we do see a need based on the things that happened in the last year that extends beyond this COVID concern. It could be something as dumb as an officer getting sprayed by a skunk while he's on patrol. Instead of sending them home to change clothes or dealing with that, if we can get them into an eye wash station and a high volume shower to decon them, anything from chemicals to animal sprays to anything else, I think it would be something that we need to probably pursue. So I would expect more likely a next year project that we'll put together, but I don't want it to kind of fade away in the sunset simply because we didn't get that grant funding. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
We're on our fourth grass fire. They just went out along the road. So I'm going out of here, and I guess in a nutshell, I'm okay with everything that's on here, but we're a little short-handed today, so if I gotta go, I gotta go. I'm just gonna, pretty much like Lance, I'm just gonna cover the line items that I deal with. The rest of them,
Page 5 is
Page
the
5.
the 101 point or
the
general.
rest of them, Brian and Amber handle, so really don't have a whole lot to do with that. First one's wages, 400. This year, IFF will be in negotiations, so I'm assuming that they will be getting a similar raise as FOP at 2%. So it's kind of, yeah, I just made some bullet points for Brian to kind of figure that in. Last year, we had a pretty decent surplus, $216,000. Of course, in our business, it depends on what's happening. It's a hard one to guess. We do have two potential, we have one definite retirement, one doesn't really want to say, but more than likely it goes. Mike Paulo will be leaving in April, that's official. Steve Hammer may possibly be leaving this fall. So figuring in the buyouts with those, hopefully those are the two definite ones. There's three more eligible at Shelby Fire. Bob Dean, Brian Finnegan, and myself are also eligible. Like with Lance, I'm not planning on leaving this year. Bob and Brian haven't indicated they're leaving, but still a possibility. 9 of our 13 employees full-time at Shelby Fire are at max vacation. So we're an older department. Kind of going along with that, towards the end of 2023, 2 more are going to be eligible to retire. The year after that, 2 more. So over half of our department in a few years here are going to be eligible to leave at any time. So we're going to have a big turnover at Shelby Fire coming up. This year, we've already had 1 extended sick leave, an injury. We've also had a deployment for 2 weeks, saving Ironton from the ice storm down there. He's supposed to come back. He's off today on military leave. Should be back next shift. He was off for 2 weeks. So
Who's that, please?
Zach Wertz. Yep, he's down with the Red Horse cutting trees. What you said, he never wants to cut trees or go to Bob Evans again. They must be feeding them there. So never again. So
Open PO at Bob's, right?
yeah, so I can't do it anymore. So those have kind of put a little dent in our budget this year so far. Hopefully our injury, he'll be back in mid-April. So that was 6 months for shoulder. So hopefully we'll get that turned around a little bit. 408 with part-paid wages. I made a proposal with Brian. I need to talk with the mayor on it, but I was kind of waiting to see. Right now they make $12.48. I was proposing maybe bumping that up to 13. I think maybe we ought to wait and see before we have that conversation about what minimum wage does. So if minimum wage goes up to 15.
I think we're going to 15.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to waste our time talking about going to 13 and turn right around and going back up. So that's my plan there. Natural gas, we have seen a little increase in that this year. I think they made a cost bump usually, but last year or 19, it was a little rough because we had no idea where we were going to be for natural gas. I mean, it's, who knows? And it's bumped up a little bit. So I think we'll be okay there. Telephone. We we've gone away from paper reporting at Shelby Fire. We now are iPad based. We have 3 iPads that we take out in the field, or they can do it back in the station to do all of our reporting. And we have 2 cell phones. And each squad has a cell phone. They can be used for EMS runs or hazmat or whatever. They can use that phone at any time. So that's kind of a little bit more of an added cost to us. As far as covering the service contracts. 471 education. We have 1 volunteer that is, that's just came up. He would like to go to 240 school. I think he is looking to, oh, what page? Oh boy, we're still on page 471.
It's page 5.
We're still on page 5, and then 703 fund. In education, he just went through medic school. He asked if we could help him out with full-time fire, which I kind of split the difference on him. It would cost almost our whole budget to send him to pay the whole thing. So we're gonna split it down the middle. It is reimbursable for us, but it's next year. So you always got, that's a year behind. Last year with that budget, we didn't have any, there was no classes, everything was canceled. So I'm trying to ramp that back up. We would like to send our 2 youngest full-time guys, Hildebrand and Lindstrom, to a extrication school down in Dayton. It's an intensive 4-day, got everything from cars to buses. It's really intensive all day work on extrication. So we'd like to send them to that. And we do continue at kind of the cost savings to use online as much as we can for EMS fees. And that's about $400. Supplies, 472. That took a huge beating last year because of the COVID supplies. At the time, when stuff was available, I bought it. And I had to. Just with us when you didn't know, you know, then when it snowballed, it all recovered. Now we got that money back, and that was big fun. But the grant was insane. But we recouped that finally, but initially we took a pretty good beat in that, but we got it all back. Fuel pretty much is what it is, depending on our runs. Something we have done is we've been using Rec 90 gas in our small engines, and that has tremendously saved on some maintenance issues.
It's recreational.
It's more, it doesn't have ethanol in it. With our we run our small engines every Monday, but we were eating through gas tanks, carburetor issues, one after another. And finally, it's like, let's try this. And it's more petroleum based. And it's worked great. Now it's also 3 something a gallon. But I'll tell you what, and for reliability and maintenance issues, it's been great. So, and we might go through 5 gallons of Rec 90 in 3 or 4 months. So I mean, this isn't a huge expense, but that has helped a bunch. Computer support, we did change, like I said, reporting software, so that's going to be a little more of an expense. It's an $1,800 minimum, and then it goes a $1 run up above that. We run, excuse me, $1,500, and then a $1 run up, but we run about 1,800 runs. So figure right around $1,800. We're going to be somewhere in that ballpark. Maintenance of buildings and grounds. You know, again, I think we owe it to the Mill Iron family, try to keep that place looking sharp. So we still use a lawn service. I mean, we could mow, but, you know, fertilize, mulch, everything else, it's all included. So we just have it done. Postage is what it is, $5.28. Miscellaneous, we use that a lot with our CPR classes, but that's also reimbursed as it comes in as we teach classes to pay for the cars. Labor relations, Mr. Crum did bounce that up a little bit because we're in negotiations this year. So I'm assuming there'll be some costs there. Other than that, in the 101 fund, unless you guys have any questions, comments, concerns. Nada. All right, I'm on page, our 703 is on page 37. Just kind of a little overview with grants. We have applied for $82,000 for turnout gear. That would be a 95% federal, 5% local, if we're lucky enough to get that. We also applied for $14,000 for state equipment grant, which we've never gotten. It's kind of a courtesy application, probably not going to happen. Division of EMS, we put in for that, and that's, it could come in from $700 to $2,000. Just depends how much money they have and how they divvy the pie up. It is what it is. We did receive a Marks grant for $2,600. That pays for half of our service fees for the Marks radios for a year. We were assured that when we switched to Marks as a county, that the marshal's office was going to continue to put that out there for us to pay for half of them as long as you apply. I have heard through the grapevine that that is no longer going to be the case. So our cost with that next year will double. Be up to right around $5,200 or more, excuse me, not more than that, yeah, $5,200. So that was pleasant. Maintenance equipment. I think you guys have seen our trucks. We try to keep up on them. One thing we've done, this year is a wet service. We do all of our own oil changes, but we do that every other year. So that's a little bit more of that. This year's oil, next year's just filters, all the air filters and everything. We go wet, dry every other year with services. Maintenance building grounds, really not a whole lot there. Equipment, miscellaneous. Service vehicle, I did have a question with that with Mr. Crum, and he cleared me up on that. Saw that there was $5,000 and the loan for our ambulance is $34,000. He just told me where it was. It's there. It's, you can tell.
Yeah, it's up in where it says note payment, line 503. And then the interest portion is line 505. So it's just up. Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought,
Yeah.
we're going
We
to
forgot the ambulance.
But that's over the nenext 7 years, 34,000 a year for spot 39. So kind of like with Lance, we're not looking at any big ticket items this year. Kind of our smaller stuff, which also some of it needs upgrading. And just kind of seeing how things shake out. They're very similar to Lance's thoughts with that. So really, most of our money with this comes from our contracts with the townships. So unless you guys have any questions, that's pretty much everything else Brian deals with, Brian and Amber. So those are the ones I deal with.
Anything in capital improvements for fire?
I don't think this year. No.
Okay.
Oh yeah, the pension fund, which is, was that 701. Yeah, we talked about that real quick, which is the same as always, really. We just calculated that out, and it's very similar to last year. So there's really nothing notable per se in that account.
It don't burn right now. Really dry. We're on number 4. So.
Power in my field's not viable.
It's in town too, we know. My place would never be.
I'm saying that could get us back into the regional news again. So that.
No, we don't need that either. I do that enough.
All right.
Yes.
Let's go back to page 5, under 507. Can you go into a little more detail on the maintenance starting down? Yeah, 5,500.
Yeah, that covers, we do the same thing, we use the same people as Lance does with the police. So you get mulch every other year, that's fertilizer, because the ground up there was a little lacking dirt and a little rough being an old factory. So that's fertilizing, spraying for weeds, and we just spray for weeds in the front where people can see in the back. It is what it is, other than seeing on the railroad. Mulch every other year, fall trimming, and I think it covers 26 or 27 cuttings during the year. So I think they do a really nice job. They've really kept the place looking pretty decent. And I think it's money well spent to get everything established. There's still a lot of bare spots out there. That was pretty rough ground. That being an old factory, there wasn't a whole lot of topsoil out there for grass to grow on.
Does that cover the land very down with a little quick there?
Yeah, we own, the city owns for the fire department up to the creek, I think is our lot, clear back to the tracks, and we did find out there's a little, our neighbors to the north, there's a little jet that goes back in there, which is which I didn't know was ours. And they had come over and had a concern with who was mowing it, and I was like, once I found out, Joe helped me out. He's like, ooh, we'll take care of it. So it's all taken care of. So yeah, we have really, there's a pretty good sized chunk of ground there. That's a big lot. And I think they've done a great job. They come in, it's a combination between Mike Reed Landscaping and John Reed. They kind of depends who's doing what when they show up, and they take care of it great. So
You used to make a comment you could do that.
we could mow.
But how would that impact timelines and everything? How many hours and?
Oh, geez, well, if we bought a mower, something, you want something out there, something commercial, because it's rough and it's big. So I mean, you're talking, what, probably $9,000 probably for a good commercial tractor. Otherwise, it depends on what we keep going up in runs. We're going up, I figured for something else over the last 10 years, we've gone up about 20% in runs. Every year it goes up. Last year, we actually went down because of the COVID, everyone was staying home, but the trend is definitely up, but it goes up and up and up every year. So as far as us doing it, it just depends on the day and time. Now, the other thing that you'd still have to pay for weed prevention, fertilizer, mulch, doing all the bushes and then keeping those look good. I know Mr. Milliron, I made the mistake of saying that I would like to see gravel and as much grass around it as possible, and I was corrected very quickly. He likes landscaping. We were going to have landscaping, and that's what it was. I'm good with that. So, no problem. But I think he really takes a lot of pride in that. And I've seen him drive by a few times, taking a look at things. So I think it's money well spent. We've had him back a few times too, just walk around.
Guess the most obvious question is, what do you do if you push them all?
We actually, the service department is a proud owner of new push mowers. We graciously made a lateral transfer in the facility to where Shane brought down his truck and we loaded him right up. He was tickled.
That was duly noted on the inventory.
That's right.
-1 push mower. Really, we don't need it. There's nothing to push mow there. Everything's mower. So, but yeah, they do a great job, and it literally just hands off. I see them, talk to them one time a year, and it's just done. They take care of it. And we're on the same schedule, so when the police gets done with mulch, we're gonna be on the same schedule, so you see them both get done at the same time, but, so everything's gonna be, they're right there, I get it, you know, you don't have to move as far, so. Works out pretty decent. Anything else?
Anyone?
Okay.
Thank you, Chief.
Yeah.
Well, I think probably I'll end up covering most of the rest of them. Jessica is in the building. She said she'd be happy to come in for her section, which is just, you know, right in there. So I can bring her in now if you want, or I can send her a message, or we can, or if you guys want me to just cover her part, I can do that as well.
You've had several discussions with her.
Mhm. Yeah, correct.
Let's hear it from you. I guess if we have further questions, we can always invite her in. How's that sound?
Okay. All right, well, let's start at the top then, guys. The good news is that while this looks like a lot, we've actually already covered most of it. This does have everything we talked about in the last time. I wanted to have one clean copy that had the entire appropriations in it. So we'll start right up here at the top of the general fund. One thing I will mention, you know, with the utilities departments, we kind of have some play. You know, we kind of control our own destiny as much as we want to keep the rates down for the taxpayers. You know, we have flexibility in that. With the general fund, and really most of the funds we talk about today, we are kind of limited based on what the current law is. And so it's, you know, as we hope for the best, we do have some more constraints with this fund. I am projecting an overall reduction of 3% of the income tax collection. Property tax numbers, I think are going to, I've got them about the same. I think they're actually going to increase a little bit this year, but I wanted to be a little bit conservative and everything. And, you know, it's funny because a year ago when we were talking about this, I told you, you know what, these numbers are here, but the world's going to change in a week, and who knows what they'll be for the worse, because right after we finished this, the city or the world went on lockdown. Here it's kind of the opposite. With the legislation that is probably going to pass this week, we are more than likely going to get some funding, but we don't know what that's going to be yet. So I have not accounted for that in these appropriations. If we get it, great. If we don't, you know, I'd much rather deal with what we know we're going to get and then figure out any bonuses later on. So hopefully things will be fabulous and we'll do much better than this. And particularly in the general fund overall, I think we're budgeting, if we spend every dime that we appropriate, I think there's about $36,000 or so left in the account, which last year the appropriations took it down to like $34,000. But once again, we put enough in there as a bit of a cushion, especially in our wages and such, you know, for everybody to retire. You know, it's like worst case scenario. So while it does get a little close, I don't anticipate that being an issue, especially since I think I've been pretty conservative on the revenue side of things.
Only to be consistent, because when we were talking about the sewer fund and how low it was, and I had said we should have, you know, one payroll in the sewer fund. To be consistent, I'm not arguing for this, but I just need to be honest with myself. You know,
it's a lot less than one payroll.
Yeah, that's a lot less than one payroll for me.
Yeah, and so we can definitely scale back some things without really being harmful. Amber, do you know off the top of your head roughly what one payroll of the general fund is? So she checked that in.
Yeah, I'm not pushing for it, but I just.
Yeah, I know it
For
is.
Consistency for myself. I need to-
And I think there are some, differences between that fund and the big old general fund, like you say. How likely is it that every retiree that we talked about is going to retire this year? Very, very, very unlikely. I know I can't go by likelihood, but maybe this makes maybe a little more sense when it's a smaller fund and then this huge fund with all that built into it. I'm all right with it, like we were last year. That would be nice. Oh,
You're right, Mayor. We've got much more wiggle room in the general fund than we do in the school.
I think I'm okay. Just
But it'd be interesting to know if
Yeah,
Amber
yes,
quickly can find
yes.
that about what the payroll would be.
While she's doing that,
Sure.
we can start here on page 1. The first section, 101 court fines collected. This is a revenue section. The judge gave me these numbers. So we had some conversations about that. And once again, you see a lot of them are a little less than what we brought in last year. She's just being conservative with those. Nothing really out of the ordinary with all of those. They're somewhat similar to last year. The next little section is what charges for services. It says general government for 996,000. That's our administrative fee. That's what we charge all of the other departments. We're down a little bit, a couple $1,000s from last year. We try to keep that about 5%, and then wiggle it a little bit based on usage. You know, if there's a fund that has very little administrative time but brings in a lot of money, we don't want to charge them full 5%, and vice versa. But that's sort of the average. They're all pretty close to that. As we talk with utilities, I calculated all of that out. The next section, intergovernmental taxes. Most of those are pretty normal, property taxes and that sort of thing. And the state grants and aids, 142. I've got that at 50,000. Historic preservation, when we get to that line item, they're hoping to apply for grants in the tune of $26,000 this year. So that shows up in that revenue line item, and then it'll show up in their expense line item as well. So that's why it's up above the normal 25,000. Thank you. Okay, so if you want to be consistent with utilities, 110 to 115,000 is what we would leave in this fund at the end of the day. Thank you, Amber. That's about it for the intergovernmental taxes revenue section. The next section is 101 LTX local taxes. And let me make sure I'm still on the same page here with everybody else. Yes. That's real estate taxes, personal property taxes, that sort of thing. Those are, last year we brought in $220,000 in real estate taxes. So I'm just going to put it at that for this year. I would hope that it will go up a little bit, but just being conservative there. Nothing else too surprising in that section. The 101 miscellaneous revenue section, most of that interest I have drastically less. We brought in $46,000 last year. I'm hoping for $5,000 this year, and that's probably a reach. I keep reducing this, and then Amber's like, that's not enough.
Some of the ones that we got.
Yeah, we're not making any money on our money for the time being. The miscellaneous income line item, 205. Last year was $400,000. We're only at 200,000 this year. It was inflated last year because that's the account that the refunds from workers' comp came into. So that was a one-time deal with that extra 200. So
That should be 2020 over there in my notes, your notes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, it should be 2020.
Okay.
Yeah, I apologize. Yeah, most of you guys don't have those notes on there, but I'll change that for my records. Thank you. Nothing else too out of the ordinary in that section. Going down to the permit section, which is more of the ordinary. Most of those I left very similar to where things were last year. I don't have any real reason to change things. I did, miscellaneous permits were up last year. I hope I get that again this year, but it wasn't really notable.
This
Hey.
this might be a question more for Joe. We were coming in, we went out of town on West Main Street, came in on Hummel Vernon Road, and with all the ADP construction, hopefully that contractor registered with the city. And
Contract registration with their working for utility, they don't have to.
okay,
And they are inside the city, most of that is outside the city, but.
so they should be paying city income tax though on the portion of that project that's inside the city.
Mhm.
Well, let me ask you this. Yes, they should be. Are they?
Well, I will check to make sure they're filing a return. And how they do it is they allocate a portion of their total net income based on their portion of revenue in the city.
Right.
So,
Which is perfectly
yeah,
makes sense and
Yeah.
is legal.
yes. So I don't know how AEP is doing this year or how they're, with everybody else, they'll probably show a loss, but I will make sure
Well,
that,
this is, but it's a contract
Yeah.
with AEP.
yeah, that's true.
So-
Yeah,
So, I
Yeah.
don't care
yeah.
what
But-
AEP does, but
Yeah, I will make sure that they are registered. Thank you for bringing that up.
Brian, you have the.
There's four. Oh, yes. That's going to be down in the park fund. Thank you. I appreciate that. It's amazing how many random large dollar grants and such there are that it's kind of difficult to keep track of. But yeah, we will see that in the park section. The next little section I have is the department transfers, which is the transfers from city income tax. But it's still first page there. Bob, last one on the first page. You'll see I'm expecting $2,162,400 from city income tax. That's down 3%. We're about $100,000 from last year. So we'll see how that comes out. Hopefully it will be not nearly that much of a shortfall. But that's where we are with that. Moving on to the next page, we start our expenditures. Well, I guess I should mention our total revenues plus our beginning balance is almost 5.8 million. So that's what we have to work with this year in our expenditures. Okay, the first of those expenditures is the building and zoning inspection department. Nothing really too notable here. We don't have any large expenditures. It's just basic office expenses. So I don't really see too much to bring up in that section. The next section is the city administration and buildings. This is fairly new. This was started in 2019 because we got rid of the 650 fund for City Hall, or yeah, 2020, I'm sorry. So many numbers, so little time. But so this is fairly new. The biggest line item, well, there's two line items here. And one I forgot to put new next to account 410, janitor's wages. That is a new account this year. We've put 20,000 in there. We have one facilities person who manages this building and the Justice Center and utilities. So we're breaking up their wages or his wages amongst the things a little more evenly this year. And so we opted to put a new line item in here.
Good.
And the other major item in here is the 507 line with 130,000. This does include a new roof for City Hall. We'd actually approved that last year, and then we put the project on hold because of the whole world. So we've put it back in this year. I want to say that's probably 125,000 ish of that maintenance building and grounds line item. Alternatively, if you wanted to save money in this fund, the 300 fund, I think, does have an ending balance of about 100,000 based on our calculations. So we could move the City Hall roof to that fund if you so chose. If you wanted to free up things more in the general fund, but that's where it is right now for your consideration. Does anybody want to discuss anything in that section before we move on? Okay, the Civil Service Department, nothing really notable there. There's $75 a year compensation and some miscellaneous expenses. That takes us to page 3, City Council. Let's see, anything notable here this year? Most of that is all just our normal expenditures. We do have on the legal advertising 480 fund, we have $1,000 encumbered from last year, which is covered in that expense, but it's amazing. Some of the invoicing has been rather slow. Anyway, that's the City Council fund. The next fund is the court fund. Most of the
When we update the appropriate or the ordinance book, where does that come out?
I think that line. I'm looking on that.
That's a good question.
I think it's American Publishers. I can try to find it.
Okay,
Thanks, Amber.
maybe miscellaneous.
Maybe.
We're trying to get away from that fund. Okay, while she does that, the court numbers, most of those came from the judge as well. Obviously, we did the wages and such and calculated for any time off and vacation and that sort of thing. I don't think that they have anybody retiring this year. No. So yeah, most of those are all administrative changes or calculations, not changes. Do I don't really have any exciting things. Yes, sir.
I see $1,000.
Oh, good question. Thank you.
What's that
Oh.
about?
We do have several new auto line items in there. Thank you for saying that. The court has inherited the police's Buick. That's right. That's right. Which they use for serving warrants and that sort of thing. So we wanted to make sure that the police department was not getting charged for those expenses.
That's publishing.
Mr. Crum,
What's that, Lance?
it reminded me of something. Two things I should have explained. One was the transfer of that vehicle. The bailiff is using it to serve papers, and he was also using it for evictions. It started to develop some mechanical issues. We weren't driving it, they were. Two things happened. One was that vehicle was then transferred to them. The other thing that I forgot to mention was in my building maintenance line item, we had a discussion with the court. They have a separate cooling unit that they need to start getting serviced annually. I got both of the quotes. That is included in our budget as one. It all comes from the same place. So it's in my line item. We will pay for it. The reason we did that was they charge a fuel surcharge and a separate charge for coming out. So we're going to try to coordinate all of the service for all the RTUs and the boilers on the same day. So we did that just to try to reduce expenses and combine that cost. And I forgot to mention that. I apologize for interrupting.
But all right, thank you. So yeah, if a tan Buick pulls up in front of your house, you're in trouble. Amber, what your
Yeah. So then the ordinance is on it. And it's- Taking off. Looks like in the past.
okay? So that would be up in the council section.
Mhm. And it's not on- That's one or the other, this one.
Okay. Does anybody else have any more comments on either the council or court sections of our expenditures? All right, if not, we'll move down to the finance department. The mayor has told me that getting a Ferrari for our department was a no, so we don't have that included. Let's see, nothing too notable in the human resources section. Amber, you, Yes. Office supplies, 473. We did bump those up because we received $4,500 for administrative costs from the CHIP program last year. So we finally have that, and we can.
So that's why we're expensing it out.
We did that, and also postage is a little higher because we are being, well, we get reimbursed by CHIP, but that's the line item that their postage comes out of as well. So we increase that for tracking purposes also. That's about all I have for the finance department. The law department, which I should probably make sure we're on the same page. I guess both finance and law are on page 4 of your packets. Nothing too notable about law either. Just normal human resources adjustments for payroll and such, and everything else. Special counsel, now that's the same as last year. Office expenses contracted. So I really don't have anything notable in that section either. That takes us to page 5 and the economic development section. There are a couple things here. First of all, I guess we'll go down to the line 546 because that's obviously the most notable section in there. 35,000 of that is our contract for Jessica's payroll. She asked for $10,000 in that line item for the facade grant program. Last year, you guys funded $10,000. We decided to cut it back due to COVID. What was it? Was it two $2,500 grants, Amber, that we did? Or was it $2,000 grants?
I don't remember.
I could.
All
right. But we did scale that program back significantly. She would like to roll that out back to the same amount that we had appropriated last year because she's really happy with it. I don't know if you guys know the two properties that received that funding last year was WRP Accounting, who used it to redo their front parking lot right there across from the old fire station. And then the Parrot Head, they used theirs to reface their building. They're halfway done with it now. But she's incredibly happy with the general program. And now that they've done it a year, I think they will maybe refine some things and make it even better. But that is her major project out of that line item. And
I think what you're describing it, and please find to be true, that the private money will follow the public money to a certain degree. And that seems to have taken place in our downtown. We were just talking just about the facade grant.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
what was the dollar amount that we ended up giving last year?
We did 2,500 per project, dollar match. Although both projects, one is not totally complete, we have not paid out on it yet, and they spent about $9,000. The project that is complete, that we did pay out on, they spent $14,000. So we got a nice return on our $2,500 investment.
And so if you ask for 10,000 again, I guess we'll still have to pay out the 2,500. So of the 48,000 we have for that line item, 35 would be for you, and then 1,250 would be for the grant program, which would leave $500 in that line item. Plus, I also have $2,000 for education for you this year. Those are really the only two non-administrative things to that line item.
And I have applied for a scholarship for the certification. I don't know, I won't know if I get it until after this process is done. So if I get that, then all of those courses.
Could you explain those courses real quick for everybody?
Yeah, so the state of Ohio, about 3 years ago, maybe, decided that they should certify economic developers. So, yeah, they certify economic developers. So basically, you, I've already taken the basic course. So that's like a week-long introduction to economic development. The rest of it is a little more in depth on each subject. So the first one is real estate. So it talks about developing real estate, you know, developing infrastructure. It just goes into great detail. It's a 2-day class. The nice thing about 2021 is they're all offered remotely. So I don't have to go to Columbus and have all those expenses. I can just do it on my computer. So first one's real estate development. There's, attraction. There's, I can't remember all of them off the top of my head. But basically, there's 5 courses that you take. And then the second part of it is a capstone project where you actually do a community project, and that's how you get your certification. So you take these courses and then you do a community project that shows that you've learned, you know, whatever it is in economic development that you learn, and that piece then allows you to get your state certification. So it really just helps me to be better at my job. That's continuing education. The other nice part about it is ours are all offered through OEDA, which is the Ohio Economic Development Association. So I get to, I'm taking it with my peers, which is helpful to make connections across the state.
Well, thank you. That was easy. Thanks for coming in, Jess.
No problem.
I thought I knew what I was talking about, but then I was like, I better make sure. Okay, so that's pretty much it for the economic development section. Everything else is just your normal office expenses and such. Okay, the next. What's that?
$210,000 in hospitalization.
Oh, wow. I may have a typo that we may need to adjust in the engineering section. Wow, how did I miss that?
Those besties you were.
Yeah, which also is going to free up a lot of the budget. Joe, put yourself in for a raise. Wow.
It's awful life.
Geez, man, that's, it's funny because I looked at this earlier. I was like, because we had over 100,000 in the end of balance, and then today I'm like, oh, gee, I thought it was a little higher than that. So that will fix a lot of my concerns. Thanks, Joe.
So that should be 21,000.
21,000, yes.
All right.
Hopefully you guys will approve that change. An idiot.
It's easy to approve them when they go down.
That's right. Okay. Yeah, so Department of Engineering, 21,000 for hospitalization. So that's a lot nicer. The engineering budget is just sort of our normal random things that will need work done for that line item 500. Most of the rest of this is all just normal expenditures. Does anybody else have any questions or comments? Any other zeros that I missed?
I don't know if this would be the place, and somebody stop me if I don't stop within 5 minutes, cut me off. Joe and I have talked before, and I think all of us have talked in general about, we're coming into a time of year now, snow's melting off, and all sorts of sights and sounds out there that need investigating, exterior maintenance issues that could, someone could just be devoted to that. And, we've kind of tossed around, I guess, just in conversation, is there ever a time when we want to bring someone on part-time just to do those exterior maintenance things? So, Joe could be the overseer, but, is there somebody that we just, I'm talking about, is it $10,000 a year? Is it $20,000 a year? Is it someone that we could have them work under Joe? I don't know if we have to solve that here but I just bring that up. But we're starting to get them. I got a little thing in the mail today. It was a flowered. Look, I got a nice little thank you, and open it up, and someone say, "Look here and look here and look here." Exterior maintenance issues, and some of them are other issues. So I don't know. Again, I don't want to take up a lot of time in this issue, but is there any place maybe we can leave some wiggle room to bring a part-time person in to help with exterior maintenance issues this year? I'm open for discussion.
I've thought for any number of years that, of course, the police would always like more people. The fire would always like more people. I get that. But I've thought for any number of years that if I were going to add an additional person to the general fund, it would be it would call the person the code enforcement officer that does the pretty city things. That can also, pick up zoning when Joe goes on vacation. But, when I see how some areas of town continue to deteriorate, we're never going to catch up the way we're doing it now. So I think that's something that deserves some serious look, and to the extent of being full-time. That's, we're thank goodness we have the pretty city ordinance. I don't know what we would do if we didn't have it. I've shared it with other communities, and I don't know what they've done, but it's the one tool we have, to take care of the worst blights.
And we may do it at a step process. I don't know, maybe bringing someone on part-time in the warm weather months and taking care of what we think are the worst of the worst. But again, I don't know if we want to put that money, I think it's always on the process, right, to hire someone full-time, but at least some part-time help for Joe. Well, kind of like we did with Star, bringing her on for scheduling vaccines. Not quite the same, but a little bit like that. Can we bring someone on to help with exterior maintenance? Where do we put that? Do we need to allocate that somewhere here, or are we just I'm just kind of asking a question. I kind of envision, I understand Councilman Gates, I would like to that, but I'm thinking, just for this year, we at least get someone on here to help in these early spring and summer months. That would really be a first step. And maybe that person does work out to be a full-time. Mr. Ron.
Back in the seventies, eighties, and into the early nineties, we had a part-time building inspector. And I'm not really sure where he fit in, what department he fit into, but that might be a way to get started, go back and look at the history of that and see where exactly he fit in and pick it up from there. And kind of just work it back in, and maybe a different title, but
Yeah, like this.
I understand what
Yeah,
Councilman Gates is saying, and I totally agree there.
It was Rob Metzger. And before him, it was Walter. I can see his face. I know where he lived on East Main Street. I can't think of his last name. I'll think about it in 10 minutes. But yeah.
And what does Phil Kern do when Phil was here?
He did that position, but I believe he was full-time.
Okay. Yeah. So somewhere in the budget, if you all are good with it, we understand what we're wanting to do here, I guess we can come back and you want to put it in here, or is it unappropriated funds that we would put towards that position, or I'm just kind of asking what the best way to maybe approach it. I think we all understand what we're trying to do. You're hearing everything okay, Darren?
Yeah, I hear you. That's good.
Okay, all right.
Well, it would probably make most sense if we were going to do something to put it in the building and zoning department of the general fund, which currently we don't have any wages. I don't know if we make it a temporary labor services type of thing.
No, and I'll tell you why. Because when we hire someone as temporary labor, they're not an employee of the city.
Mhm.
And if you've got someone who's going to go out and enforce the law, enforce the codes, that person has to be a city official, city employee.
That makes sense.
That's very different than the lifeguards at the pool.
Mhm. That makes sense. Yeah.
Let's go his wages, might fit best under there, or her wages.
Yeah, and like we do have a wages section in that currently doesn't have anything appropriated. That goes
What page
over.
is that?
That would be page 1. Or page 2, top of page 2.
Folks, we've been at this an hour and a half. I need a stretch break.
All right.
Have a unanimous consent, everybody agree? All right, let's do it. 5 minutes, 10 minutes?
Depends how long the line is at the restroom.
Oh.
But we were talking about bumping that up to run parallel for a while with another A line.
Mhm.
And I think that's the same as last time. And it didn't show up on the front cover page.
Is it in distribution or is it in?
Yeah,
Is it in distribution or should it be in maintenance or?
Distribution. Did you change another line?
Yeah. We probably should bump it up a little, I guess, a little more than that. Yeah. I guess I was thinking, well, how long is it going to be split? So we can either ask them to change it now or if we.
We're probably still on.
Yeah. So, or we can do legislation later. I'm saying, I didn't leave quite as much padding in that account as I thought I did. Yeah. It's amazing how much that's gone up in 1 year. Did we just add somebody last year? Because it was that number last year, then we go up 8,000.
19 to 20.
Yeah.
John.
But, you know, even that spread is probably 2.5, maybe 3 months of an extra person. Yeah, maybe 2 months of an extra person. So how long are you planning on?
We can't say publicly.
Yeah.
There is no problem.
Uh-huh.
Pretty much understand it.
Mhm.
And that may cover it.
If it doesn't, you know, I've got another 5 that I can put in there.
Well, they probably won't find it, would it?
Uh,
How much can you split up?
I can increase line item by 5,
5%.
5 grand, 5,000. So, you know, that would buy us another month. And so, and of course I could do wages and public employees retirement, FICA and hospitalization and all of that. So, yeah, so that would buy us another month or 2. So I'd say we probably have 3 months of play for a person right now.
One question, talk to John, did he ship over a figure?
He just emailed me saying, hey, maybe we should bump it up, but I didn't get an actual figure. You know,
If we say make it 495 and then we can put another 5, and that would for sure covers for whatever. Because there's going to be a time when say however long parallel Alex and the new guy are going to be running, both of them are going to be crew chiefs. That's going to be a little more expensive too. But that's John too.
Yeah, see if he wants it bumped up even more. Yeah, he probably can. He's on the phone.
How many court clerks are there?
That would be a better question for Amber. I want to say
There is a clerk and a deputy clerk, and then I believe 1 or 2 part-time deputy clerks.
Okay. So 2 full-timers anyway.
Correct.
Or do you need email?
Oh.
Insurance.
Oh boy.
What's on?
Good times.
That Buick,
Uh-huh.
that was a forfeiture from my last DWI.
That's awesome.
Very last one.
It lives forever.
I had like 7 priors. Car.
And we still have it.
It was a nice car. Didn't have to do a mile on it, 'cause had to have the parking.
That's right, that's right. Wow.
In the middle of the afternoon. Come back and see,
Oh, man.
over Main Street.
That's amazing. That's awesome.
I remember the Mercedes-Benz the department had back in the 80s.
Yeah, we had one of those too.
Wow.
It was pretty sad shape. I drove it once. I don't think I'll do that again. Yeah.
That's impressive.
The other way that is printed is Mercedes.
Yeah.
Mercy B's payments is killing me.
Well said, well said. That's about the truth, right?
Heard that joke from Walter Fauntleroy, who was the delegate from the District of Columbia to the House of Representatives.
Really?
He greeted us at a meeting I was at.
Huh.
Well, that was $189,000 that we found.
Gosh, oh, what a stupid mistake that was on my part. You know, just so many numbers and
What do you think?
I know, right? So yeah, that makes, that gives us a lot more comfort in this fund.
I flashbacks to teaching place value
That's
in
right.
math class.
You know, that's the pros and the cons of the formulas. Is, well, gee, it automatically calculates, so what could possibly go wrong? Unless you have poor input.
Darren, how long are you homebound?
Well, I gotta have to go back to the doctor on Friday,
Okay,
so I'll know more then. So but I've been back to the emergency room once, and I may end up back there this evening.
Okay.
It doesn't, I'm sick and I don't know why. Sicker than I think I should be.
But on the other hand, you know, that's a great shock to the system, I suppose, and
Yes.
who knows what those side effects will be for a little while.
Good luck, Darren.
Yep, thank you.
Nathan, are you with us?
He may have stepped up for a break.
Okay.
Well, Brian, I'll make this next part really, really short for you, Darren.
Right. We'll just breeze through the rest of
Put the
this.
pressure on you now.
I can talk as fast as you guys want me to. We might miss another $189,000, but
Let's not do that.
let's not do that. That's
No.
I'm glad it was that way.
well, about this idea, this position, I'm not sure this is the time to resolve it.
Good, I'm fine.
But I think it needs some serious look. One thing we might look at are the models that the townships have for their zoning inspector. You know, do they get a certain base pay plus hourly on top of that? You know,
Good idea.
how do, like, are you thinking just driving around and finding things? Because could our taxi driver do that? No, well, during his downtime, like, I don't know.
He's not.
Oh yeah, that's right, he's not a city employee, you're right, we can't do that.
This is the
Like,
train
well, I don't
person.
know how much time he has while he's not carrying people in the parking lot.
Somebody said some sort of training, we just really need to get serious about it. We'll find a way, okay, I just want to make sure that, I think we're all thinking in the same direction, just finding the best way to do it. I'm good.
Okay, we're ready.
All right, turn that baby back on. Fell asleep a little bit there. Okay, we are back live, being recorded. Okay, I think we're just finishing up engineering. And we have, let's see, we got finish the fire. That takes us to page 6. And the mayor. Okay. What do we have in this department? First part is just normal human resources stuff. Hospitalization is the correct number this time. Nothing really too notable in that department. You know, most of those expenses are all just your normal office expenses and administrative costs. So I just kind of based it off of last year for the most part. That takes us down to the miscellaneous section, still on page 6. Most of this is also administrative. You know, we always kind of bump up that 531 line item for just the randomness, whether it's just something that can't be classified, or if we run short of another fund and need to transfer out of that. That's kind of how we base that. We just base it off of, or I just base it off of prior years. The other notable item here is the historic preservation line item, line 652. I spoke with Christina Drain. The biggest thing that she would like to do is they're looking into a potential grant that would be $24,000. Let's see, this would be the CLG grant. And obviously we spoke that would be, unfortunately, I don't have clarification of what that grant is. Obviously we want to expend it if we do not get the funds, but that is $24,000 of that. Then she asked for $1,000 for education for the various members of the commission, likely to include the Heritage Ohio and other webinars and conferences. And then she asked for $1,000 for printing, local design guidelines, window signs, and other expenses. And then, so those were, I guess you would have $2,000 for that, or $3,000. Those are random things. So that is what the commission is asking for this year, is $28,000. The vast majority of that would be a grant. Oh, I'm sorry. The other $2,000 is a digitizing grant, which we've already gotten. So we're looking at a $24,000 potential grant, $1,000 for education, and $1,000 for printing. That has not already been spent. Well, received and spent, I guess. Does anybody have any questions or comments about anything in the miscellaneous section?
Yeah. Our taxi, we were told, is going fine, basically. So it is something that we kind of have to replace in our future. So I didn't know if there were any thoughts on what to do with the taxi. I think it had transmission problems. Let's take this off of it. I think it had transmission problems last year. And I didn't get much more of a expected life out of that vehicle currently. So that is a concern that we do have with the taxi. I didn't know if that was wrote in anywhere.
Yeah, that's a good question. And we do need to bring that up. I don't know if I had a note for myself under, I think later on there's a transportation department. So yeah, I guess I do have the, yeah. So we can either talk about that right now, because we have the taxi line item under miscellaneous, or there's service vehicle under transportation, which I don't know which one is which. It doesn't matter, but yeah. And the other place we can look at is the 283 local coronavirus relief fund. We still have some money in there that we might be able to use for a taxi if we so choose to get one. Steve, do you have any input on this?
Well, I think it'd be nice to have a vehicle with an upholstery that is more easily cleaned. It's, we have the typical cloth upholstery, and by the way, we are bringing on a backup taxi driver. It's coming in tomorrow to begin running a taxi again, and in his training, it was always, cleaning between each fly and so forth. A different vehicle with a fabric that was, how do you say, more easily cleaned with actual cleaner, and so I think the advantage. I'm not so sure about getting in and out of this one. I haven't had a lot of complaints, but maybe something that is, a little better accessible for the citizens that we pick up. I guess bottom line, yeah, I think it would be an investment for the future of the taxi service to have another vehicle. And I think the coronavirus or the CARES Act funding fits in that regards, especially if you're doing something for the interior, that it's going to be a safer environment in the future, or whatever virus you may be doing. So I don't know if some of the vehicles, what did we pay for with our health department vehicles? Was that 25-ish?
I think it was about 23.
Yeah.
That.
I don't know if you could get a nice vehicle for around 30 perhaps, do we put maybe a combination of the CARES Act funding and another item, put them together and allow for 30,000 for hopefully a new vehicle.
Yeah, from my standpoint, especially with the CARES Act funding, which after encumbrances, we're starting the year with about just shy of $25,000 in that fund. And we might still cancel some of those encumbrances. But that money has to be spent this year. If we don't spend it by December 31st, we give it back. So, my thought is, I think we can do some things to make it easier to clean, and keep people, safe and secure. So that might be a valid use of some of those funds.
We did suggest it last year.
Yeah.
It just kind of got put aside. I think we have to figure out what vehicle would work, I think, and go from there.
Oh,
I mean, I'm all for it if there's a consensus among council.
Well, it's a wonderful service.
It's been sorely missed in the absence of our driver, so yeah, it's needed.
well, if
You want to put 20,000 someplace, and then with the lieu of maybe using 10,000 from the CARES Act, does that sound reasonable?
What do you think we'll have left? I mean,
I would almost be apt to use as much of the CARES Act money as we can for it, because anything that we purchase, we can also purchase in general fund. We might as well drain that fund, and with I think this would be a very valid purchase to justify.
I have a question.
Sarah.
I know we've talked about this numerous times before, but have we looked at lift contracts at least, even if it's in a supplemental role? Have we looked at that?
I don't think the clientele that we have would engage in that.
But they don't have to, right? So what they would do is they could call City Hall, and City Hall can use a computer to set it all up for them.
Yeah, I'm saying, I suppose we could act as an intermediary. The one thing that I would have to confirm is the Area on Aging reimburses us a pretty decent chunk for our actual operating costs. And so I don't know if they would still reimburse us for those or not, but I can certainly look into it.
Well, I think there's something else too, and I'm not trying to pour cold water on it, Councilman Martin, but I think there's a certain relationship that's developed among the clientele and the driver that it goes beyond just the mere service. I just think that's part of the beauty of living in a city our size, and they develop that, because there's a kinship there. And I'm not so sure you'd have that in a, you know, for hire type service. So like if we said 20,000, we wouldn't have to spend that, but I'm saying, you know, if we're able to invest CARES Act monies to the tune of 15 to 20, only spend 5 out of that, whatever, I'm fine. I don't want to come up short. We're going to do this. Let's have that there, not intending not to spend it, but it would be there in case we had to.
Mhm.
So where would you put, I mean, if we're all right with that.
What fund is CARES?
283. And that's on page. You know, I've got, it's page 19 is the CARES Act funding. And yeah, I did, unfortunately, most of you don't have the encumbrances line item. But you know, I can easily take that $10,811 out of wages and apply to it. I've got about 5,000 in maintenance, buildings and grounds that's not accounted for, and about 3,000 in equipment, as well as 3,000 in computer support. I would be happy to reduce these amounts for what we don't already have encumbered and add a new line item for a service vehicle out of this fund. For, I could probably $24,500. I could is, you know, free and clear. It's not encumbered, so that would be a potential option. It might put us a little short on the vehicle, but we could put $5,000 or so into the general fund.
So you're saying.
I would reduce.
Line 564, it would be $24,500.
Correct.
And you would reduce what's there.
Yeah, I have to reduce them all to just what's encumbered, essentially.
Okay.
We are gonna have some stuff come through. As we call it.
Yeah, that's
So we do
true.
need a little buffer for that.
You're right. So maybe we should make it
But,
$20,000.
Back the end of the year, I mean, we can make a tax purchase. I think it would be like, it's going through the summer, so maybe make that like the last one for salad on that fund now.
That's true.
Because they might get more, who knows?
Yeah, and I just don't know what that number is that you can get, you know, if we're talking about new, or if we're talking about one that comes off lease or whatever. But I just think you have to make sure the interior,
That's
it's
gonna
gonna
be
be more expensive, like a pleather or whatever you want to call that.
Yeah.
It's gonna raise the price up.
We might even have to have it. Yeah. That'll be hard to find.
Or vinyl type seat or whatever, I'm sure.
So instead of 24.5, what did I hear?
You want to do 20,000 for this, for the time being?
Yeah.
Okay.
What about 20 here and then 20 someplace else? And again, not intending to spend it, but just in case.
Yeah, I'm saying,
20.
yeah, we definitely have to do more out of the general fund.
15.
Okay, then.
Hold on a second, let me throw this number in here so I don't forget about it. Blue. So that's going to take us back to. Okay, so we would be going back to page 7, transportation. The 564 service vehicle. Instead of 0, we'd have 10 grand, I guess, in there. That would give us a $30,000 budget. Plus, you know, if we go a little over that, I'm allowed to move some things around.
Good, this should be as close.
Okay.
There you want to first.
Does everybody agree with that?
All right with that.
Any opposition?
Okay. Change those numbers. Come on, Brian. Okay. So I will clean that up. And well, we can, yeah, once we get to that page, we can talk about the 283 real quick again, and we'll change the rest of those numbers on that fund because we'll be there in just a moment. So I've made that change in the 101 transportation line item for line 564, service vehicle for $10,000. There's nothing really else notable in there. The temporary labor services, it was only 16 last year, but that's because we were closed for half of the year. So I'll bump that back up to 26,000 for this year. The next little section is the 101 department transfers, which is the transfer of 180,000 to both the police and fire pensions, which is pretty normal. I am transferring 30,000 to the police equipment fund, which covers their clothing allowance really for next year because we're obligated to pay that, but I think it comes out like right at the beginning of January. So we want to make sure that those funds are already transferred to the police equipment fund before year end. So that's what I have for the transfers. That gives us, including the change to purchase a taxi, an ending balance of $215,619 in the general fund, which is a lot healthier than when we started the day. Gosh. That's right. Okay, does anybody have any other questions about the general fund, or shall we move along? Okay, the 200 fund we've already spoke of. So we'll skip over that one. We did that last time. As the 205 and the 210 funds, we also spoke of last time. So that's going to take us to 220 fund, which is on page 10, city income tax. As we've always already talked, I'm projecting a 3% decline overall in taxes. That's projecting 10% declines in our returns, both business and individual. But a more par for the course withholding about the same really, because it seems like most people are back to work, thankfully, in our little town. And our withholding for the first, at least through January, was actually up from last year. So that's where I came up with those revenue numbers. Wages, nothing too out of the ordinary with all of those line items. Do I have the administrative costs, 100,000? That's what we've had it at the last few years. That is below 5%. I think it's like 4.2 or something. It might even be less than that. I don't think I have that sheet in front of me, but we do make this lower than most of the funds because the admin is just not quite as great as some of the other ones for the revenue that it brings in. We are anticipating slightly larger refunds this year than we had last year. That's line 506. Last year was only 38,000. Obviously, if business returns are down, that will potentially involve more refunds and maybe some individuals as well. So we wanted to keep a healthy line item there. That's about all I have for the expense section of income tax. And then you'll see the transfers, which are all by, I think, well, the sidewalk, streets, and justice center, those are all based on ordinances. And then we put 95% of what's left in the general fund, 5% in the capital improvements. I believe we do have some leeway if we chose to. I don't see any real reason to deviate from that this year. And that's about all I have for the income tax fund. If no one has any questions about that, we'll move on to page 11 and the health department. Revenues, I did change these. I dropped down the state grants and aids and then the miscellaneous line items because I still had the prior year grant numbers and expense numbers for the West Main Street sewer when I sent that to you guys on Friday. These are more accurate of what we project to bring in this year. Nothing really too out of the ordinary as far as the income side. Once we get to the expenses, well, even, I'm sorry, I'm still need to look at the permits. You know, I'm expecting permits to go up a little bit as far as food licenses and pool licenses and everything. But nothing really notable changing from prior years. The expenditures from the Department HEA Health. Technically, I believe that Beth is eligible to retire this year. I have not heard of any plans for doing that, but we wanted to keep a little bit of a balance in there just in case. Most of this is just administrative stuff. The supplies, the 472 line item, I did bump that up rather significantly due to the vaccine clinics. We're doing a lot of work right there. And so, you know, most of that will get reimbursed, but, well, I shouldn't say that. I don't know that for sure. It's probable that there would be some sort of funding for that. But I wanted to make sure we had those expenditures for the needed supplies. Yeah.
Pretty much all coming out of that.
Yeah. I did also increase the miscellaneous, the 531 line item, mainly due to the vaccine clinics. Obviously, we're paying a little bit of rent for the senior center, and we just have other random expenses related to those that are quite out of the ordinary. So I wanted to make sure we had plenty of funding there. And the temporary labor services, we have 25,000 in there. I don't anticipate us using quite that much, but we did hire the person to make the phone calls. And so I want to make sure that was included as well. That moves us to the next page, which is still the health department, the sanitation side of things, or sanitarian. The biggest thing here is the miscellaneous, which, you know what, I need to increase that a little bit. I did screw up there. I put 25,000 in this morning, but I've got 40,000 encumbered, so that should be 65,000. My apologies for that. I had a conversation and then I forgot to look at my encumbrances again. So yeah, if you could change line 531 under 225 HSA to 65,000, I would be grateful. That will cover all of our encumbrances and what's left on the West Main Street sewer project that we haven't paid out yet. And that is all I really have for the health fund. Steve, are you okay making that change? Or okay, it's in the health department fund. It is the top of page 12, the miscellaneous line item. It's 531. I would like to, if it's okay with council, change that to 65,000 from 25,000.
Does everybody agree? Yeah. Okay. Anybody opposed to that? Okay.
I wrote it down, 65,000, so.
you on there?
Excuse me?
Nathan on there?
I wrote down 65,000, marked off 25,000, so
Okay. All right, I just see.
And yes, I am here.
Okay, got it. You okay with that?
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. Okay, if there's nothing else with the health department, we'll move on to the park fund, which is also on page 12. Let's see, as far as revenues, I expect recreation, like rental fees and pool passes up. I expect those to kind of go back up from 2020. So I left that at 60,000, which was budgeted last year. Property tax rollback. I have, kind of bumped that up because I expect that to stay even or go up a little bit. The state grants or aid, line 142 of 357,500. 7,500 of that it's already been received. We received that based on once the completion of the Black Fork Commons restroom was done. We got most of it last year, but that last little chunk was final paperwork and such. And so we didn't receive it until early January. The other $350,000, that is funds that we will receive for the Black Fork Commons from the state side of things. And which, while we're talking about that, if you go down a couple sections to the 230 miscellaneous, there's a new local grants line item. It's 147 for 550,000. Those are funds we will get from the CIC to pay for the Black Fork Commons. So that the project is covered. It's just sort of in and out type of things. Between the two is just our local taxes, our real estate and personal property taxes, which there's really nothing notable there. I've got them set like last year. The back to 230 miscellaneous revenue, donations of $4,000, $3,100 was donated in January for a disc golf course. So the park board is working on placement of that. So you guys will see that later this year. And then the rent would be the pavilion rentals, which should go up a little from last year. They have not? Man, nobody wants to visit our pavilions. They're beautiful. Well, I guess it makes sense. Large groups, it's hopefully we're get past this and get back to that maybe by 2021 or 2022. That's about all I have on the revenue side. Expenditures, don't have a lot out of the ordinary other than the Black Fork Park, which is line 647 of 905,000. 900 of that is coming from either the CIC or the state. The other 5,000 is just budgeted for random maintenance and such at that facility, much like the other parks. So they don't really have any major expenditures as capital projects this year at this point. We do not have any debt stuff. That's 230 DBT, which is the bottom of page 12. You'll see some in 2020, but that was just to pay off their portion of the Black Fork, the restrooms and everything. So nothing moving forward as far as debt for this fund. That takes us to the top of page 13, which is the park, just general operations. I don't really have anything unusual in this line item. I think temporary labor services will be way up over, well, not way up. I put a little pad in there, but they will be up over last year because I think even in the park side of things, they did cut back last year, not just the pool side. But I don't really have any notable out of the ordinary line items for that department of the fund. Going down to the pool section, which is the bottom of page 13. Once again, I don't really have a whole lot outstanding. Temporary labor, I would imagine that will probably be staffed a little more, although we did get the pool open fairly quickly last year. But talking with Jerry and the park board, I don't see any major projects or anything out there this year. They had to do some service work last year, so hopefully that'll keep us from being too cost intensive this go around.
Brian, where is the concession pool revenue on the revenue side?
I think that gets lumped into the recreation line item.
Okay. Includes. Thank you.
Does anybody have anything else with the 230 fund? We're getting close now, guys. I know there's a lot more pages left, but most of them we've already talked about. Yeah, it will be. Okay, the 232 fund, it's a CHIP program. Those are basically numbers they give us. It's all goes in and goes out. Yeah, so.
But there's stuff on that previous grant, you have to learn to do COVID, so it goes 2 year cycles, 2018 to 2021, they're still actually coming out this year, so a little bit that's going to spill over. And they're already taking applications for new grant, so it's kind of all up in the air right now for them, but she's getting organized.
Okay, so that takes us to, let's see, that's the 232, so 233, the court probation fund. Once again, nothing too out of the ordinary here. It's just it's the same sort of funds coming in, and the judge gave me these numbers, by the way, and of course we confirmed the wages and everything else. So nothing too substantially notable there. That would take us to the 234 fund, which we had no transactions in last year. I don't really anticipate having too much this year, if anything. So that's sort of a placeholder. The 235 fund. What's that? Oh yeah. Oh, sorry, Lance did talk about that. That makes that easy. 236. Yeah, it's just sort of more of the same with that one as well. We base that on prior years. 237 fund. I should probably keep you guys posted. We're already to the bottom of page 15 now. Yeah, that's status quo. And then 238, I believe Lance talked about. 239 court computer, that's really more the same. The judge did say they've got to get a new program for the probation department. So 239 fund line 501, they're requesting 13,500 for, but nothing too out of the ordinary. Which takes us to page, oh no, we're still on page 17. Or I'm sorry, page 16. Yeah, so the 240 fund, nothing really surprising, no income, maybe $500 just as a placeholder value there. The 241 fund is also, just sort of another year for that fund. Yeah, 242 is same thing. So that takes us to what, 250, which is on page 17. Yeah, so that's part of the CHIP program. That is also more, that's what they're projecting to bring in and expend. So they're just kind of taking their numbers and going with it.
This is your longer year cycle. Don't get it when we spend this year, they have to spend next year.
Makes sense. I'm still learning all these things too. 251 fund is same thing.
It's different for each department.
Don't really have anything specific to talk about there. The 253 fund, sort of a placeholder account as well. No really notable action. Yeah, so hopefully that doesn't get touched. We're now on page 18, the 275 special bond retirement fund. We don't have anything going on there. I have a wish for $10 in interest, but I doubt it. That's right. Yeah, that'll be at 0 this year.
Investments.
Terrible. Okay, so that takes us to page 19, the 281 fund, general bond retirement. We have no activity in that fund this year. The 282 fund, USDA, no activity in that fund either. Okay, that takes us back to 283. At this point, I do not anticipate any funds coming in to this specific, any revenues coming into this fund. Who knows, and if we do get money, I don't know if they will put limitations on it to say it has to go to a coronavirus relief fund, or if they'll just say, here, just have it and it just goes to general and we do what we want. But so I will do some things, obviously we talked earlier about freeing up $20,000 for a service vehicle. I can easily I would like to remove the wages line item, make that 0. That would free up almost 11,000 of it. And then if I make maintenance, building and grounds, 45,000, that would free up some. And then I've got to get another $4,189. So I would take 2,000 out of computer support, and then I would take the other $2,189 out of equipment.
What does that make
So that value would be $27,811. Yeah. Oh, I'm sure. Well, I'm saying I should have done it in my mind. That's not that hard of math. I just was being lazy. Okay, so my suggestions for this fund are to increase the service vehicle line, which would be a new line item, to $20,000. Then I would reduce wages line 400 to 0. I would make computer support 501, make that 13,000. Maintenance, building, grounds, that's a line 507, make that 45,000. And then equipment, line 515, $27,811.
Good deal.
That was good.
That's going to be 20,000.
Okay, I'm okay with that. Charlie, you okay with that?
I got that. Yep.
Nathan?
On the mute here. Yep.
Okay.
All right, we'll make that happen. Good. I think that'll be a good use of those funds. I think the county, state, feds, I think they'd all be pretty happy with that. Okay, so that concludes the 283 fund. So that moves us on to the 300 fund, which is on page 20. What do I have in here? The miscellaneous income line of 25,000, that's line 205. That's a repayment from the utilities department. I think this might be the last year. We might have one more. Yeah, we'll double check that, but that's where that comes in. The rest of the funding for this is from the city income tax. So it'll be 113,750 this year. We currently do not have anything coming out for the city building here, or for the fire department. Miscellaneous is mostly just your normal stuff, that GIS system, John kind of talked about a little bit, the utilities meeting. That moves us down to the police section, and Lance covered those. Department projects, 300 PRO, which is the bottom of page 20. Those are, well, first the equipment line 515, that $5,000 is a portion of the Ventrac mower that's getting split between the various funds. The $25,000 Whitney Avenue Bridge, I think most of that is outside bridge repairs to that facility, or to that bridge. I don't know, John, are you on right now? You may not be.
Yes, I'm on.
Who would have thought? Do you have anything to say about the bridge?
Just a little bit, as we discussed during the Utilities and Streets Committee meeting, that the Whitney Avenue Bridge over the railroad tracks will have the side embankments have what they call gunite or shotcrete sprayed on the sides to control the spalling that's taking place. That's the work that's earmarked for this year for the Whitney Avenue Bridge.
Very cool. By the way, full disclosure, guys, I do own a property beside that bridge. So if you guys want me to leave to discuss something about it, I am happy to do so. I don't really care what you do with it. So
I don't know if it's a big deal, but we do also have to have a bridge over the river. Along with Avenue Railroad Bridge. They put RR before the word bridge. So not confused with the bridge over the river.
I think last year we actually included both bridges on that line item.
Well, it should have been plural.
Yeah. Yeah, would you like me to make it plural? Or make RR?
Railroad bridge, right?
Yes.
Or put a parentheses RR beside it, outside of the parentheses.
Okay.
Parentheses RR parentheses.
Okay.
How's that sound? Just so we know.
Very cool. All right. And then the other items, I guess the dump truck, sorry, that's 300 street department, which is, or it's somewhat close to the top of page 21. They do have $30,000 for their 1-ton truck with plow that is also being broken up amongst various funds. That is all I have for capital improvements this year. It would leave $100,823 in the fund for the upcoming years. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to discuss about 300? Okay, the 304 court capital improvement fund. That's pretty much similar to prior years. They don't have any notable changes in income or expenses. So I don't have a whole lot to talk about there. The 352 fund we've already spoken about. Don't have anything exciting to talk about that's changed. Other than I think I did on that first page I gave you guys, I did adjust the income tax transfers to both the 352 and 353 funds but neither makes any notable change to them. But as I was cleaning stuff up after the utilities meeting, I did that. So nothing notable about the 353 fund. Chief Combs covered most of the 354 fund. I will say that the bond payment is significantly less. We're only budgeting 65,000 this year compared to 275,000 last year. Part of it is the initial changeover of the bond refunding. It just kicks in later. So in future years, it'll be twice that. It'll be about 130,000 for the bond payment. We do still pay the interest. That's the normal year's interest going forward. It'll be about 90,000. So switching that over last year was very helpful. Should free up a lot of money in that over the years. I also do have under the 354 police court construction section, line 536 construction, that $30,000. 17,000 of that is encumbered, I believe, from roof repairs, which we are hoping to get reimbursed for. So I know Lance has been dealing with that, so that's why that line item is up this year. That's all I have for the 354 fund. We already covered the 400 through 600 funds. And, I made the changes you guys suggested from last year. I noted those on the first page, or from last meeting. I'm sorry. So that's going to take us all the way to let's see. The 650 fund is still here, page 35, although maybe, I can't remember. We could, yeah, we can.
Yeah, I think we have.
Okay. The 650 fund obviously is no longer in use. So there are no transactions in that fund. Police pension 700 we've covered more or less. That is all par for the course, as well as fire pension. There's nothing unusual there. So that takes us to, well, let's see, 702, which we've already discussed. That's on page 37. Oh yeah, that's, woo. All right, 705. It's a big one. We have 4,000 of projected income and 4,600 of expenses split between tree planting and tree trimming. So nothing too crazy there. The 706 fund, I don't really, it is what it is. It's just based on prior years. We don't expect any major changes to that one either. 710 fund, which, yeah, we're still in the middle of page 38. Nothing, once again, I was wishing for $100 of interest, but if I get $10, it would be more than a miracle, I'm sure. So we just budgeted some miscellaneous expenses in case. Yes, yeah, that.
For the late John Schaefer, who was a lawyer from out of state. Since it was permitting purpose no longer downtown, that fountain, it's now designated for the police station fountain, and so repairs of the miscellaneous, was just repairs for that fountain. And that's been communicated Lance, so he's aware of that, and he's going to work to seek funds from that fund.
Okay, that takes us to our hospitalization fund, Fund 715, which is at the bottom of page 38. While it's big numbers, there's really nothing too exciting about it. It's sort of based on the slight increases that they've told us, and
In and out.
Yep, in and out. Yeah, hopefully it does well. Our 800 fund, the bicentennial trust fund, of a whopping $322. Yeah, so, but I couldn't round down. So let's see, 815 fund, obviously we're on page 39 now. There's no activity. And that, my friends, is all I've got.
I'll sponsor the ordinance.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. I'll have that ready for tomorrow. And we'll get this done. I really appreciate everybody's help, both council and all of the administrative staff who has helped me once again get through this project. Couldn't do it without you guys and girls.
Any final questions? Anything before we adjourn? Adjourn.
2:30.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Darren. All the best, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.